My name is Amanda Barton. I'm a partner with Mr. Cannabis Law. Mr. Cannabis Law and Canacor Group are bringing you this presentation today. Before I had the opportunity of joining Mr. Cannabis Law, I have been an attorney in the business realm for over 10 years. I've done all sorts of alternative finance. I've worked in-house for various companies. I have lots of experience when it comes to M&A work, corporate governance, strategic structuring, asset protection, and the like. Along with me, we have a great group of panelists today, very well-educated professionals. I'm very excited about talking with all of them. To start with, we have Paula Sachenka, who is the founder of the Canacor Group. Paula, do you want to give a brief introduction?
Sure. Thanks, Amanda. Hi, guys. My name is Paula Sobchenko. As Amanda said, I'm the founder of Canacor Group. We are a full-service business licensing firm for the cannabis industry. And I also am the founder of PS Law Group. We are a full-service licensing law firm. My background is in administrative law. And within that, I have a focus on regulated substances licensing, regulatory compliance, and tax work. So happy to be here with you guys today.
Great. Thank you so much, Paula. We really appreciate you joining. Next up, Andy Sick. Andy is an attorney licensed in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. He recently came on as an of-counsel attorney with Mr. Cannabis Law. So welcome to the team. Andy, we're very excited to have you. Do you want to give us a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Amanda. Like Amanda said, my name is Andy Sick. I'm an attorney. I've been practicing for about 15 years. My focus has been on business. I started off doing business litigation and then moved into startups and outside general counsel services for businesses. I also have extensive commercial transaction experience and a lot of regulatory experience. So, and in addition to that, I do a lot of work with entheogenic plants and cannabis as well. So, it's a nice fit, and I'm really happy to be here and have joined on with Mr. Cannabis Law. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. And last but definitely not least, we have Sean Hardwick, who is probably the oldest employee with Mr. Cannabis Law. Sean is our regulatory analyst extraordinaire. Sean, welcome. Do you want to give a little bit of background about yourself as well?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Amanda. So my name is Sean Hardwick. I've been in the cannabis industry for a couple of years now. Started off doing licensing. I've done over 17 marijuana licenses across various states. Including the last round of Illinois, where we got 5 perfect scores on our retail licenses. But now I'm part of the Mr. Cannabis team, helping with hemp companies, marijuana companies, and psychedelic companies. And before I joined the team, my experience is in commercial real estate.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining. We'll just dive right into it because I know our time is limited today. So everyone's here not to talk about us, but to hear more about the New Jersey regulations. Most of this presentation is going to be based on licensing of businesses and really geared towards businesses. However, we have received a ton of questions about personal use. So I just want to address some questions right off the bat and kind of get those out of the way. Andy, I'll direct these questions to you. Under the new rules that just were promulgated, how much cannabis can a consumer purchase or possess at a given time?
Under the new rules, anyone over 21 can have up to an ounce of cannabis flower or the equivalent of an ounce of cannabis in solid, liquid, or concentrate form, which means things like edibles, cartridges, oils, etc.
Wonderful. And I guess I should back up and give a little bit of a summary. So back in February of 2021, Governor Phil Murphy signed into law the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Enforcement Assistance and Marketplace Monetization Act, which that basically established New Jersey's adult use industry for cannabis. Now, under that, they created the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, the CRC. So you'll hear throughout this presentation us referring to the commission or the CRC, and that's what we're referring to. Now, the CRC will oversee the adult use marijuana industry in New Jersey. So the original Modernization Act gave the power to the CDC to come up with the rules and regulations. So in August, the CRC came out with its first set of special rules, and that's really what we're discussing here today. Again, these just came out on August 19th. They're somewhat new. It's 160 pages of material, which is available on the state's website. So if you're interested in reading those 160 pages, feel free to go to the state of New Jersey website and you can access that material. We also might include a link on our website to those rules, but we're trying to give you a summary here today. So hopefully you don't have to read all of that. Back to you, Andy. As far as consumers, is there anything in the rules that governs home grow or growing cannabis in your home? We get this question weekly.
Okay. Yeah, no, as of now, New Jersey residents are not allowed to grow plants at home. That being said, there's rapidly increasing support for cannabis home grow, and not to mention the nearby states of New York and Connecticut, which just legalized recreational cannabis, have all made provisions for home grow in their own legislation. So everyone around New Jersey is getting ready to do this. But most recently in New Jersey, a state senator introduced a bill to allow anyone 21 years or older to have to grow 6 plants at home. And if there's a household, they can have a total of 12 plants. While it didn't pass, we'll likely see this permitted in the future, and it really only seems to be a matter of time.
Great, wonderful. I kind of want to jump right into the different types of licenses and kind of discuss the licensing scheme. Paula, could you kind of give us just a brief overview of the different types of licenses in New Jersey? So like in Florida, in order to get a license, you have to do everything from seed to sale, where it's called vertical integration. New Jersey has set up their adult use statute so that you can apply for different types of licenses, such as just cultivation or just retail. Can you kind of go over the different licenses that the New York legislature has set up?
Sure. So we have 6 different classes of licenses, and there's also restrictions within those as to how many you can hold and what types you can hold together. So we have cultivation licenses. Those go in tiers up to 150,000 square feet of canopy space. Then we have manufacturer licenses, wholesaler license, and the cultivator and manufacturer licenses come with a wholesaler license already. You have the ability to transport, but some people do want to apply for wholesaler licenses separately. Then you have a distributor license that's being distributed directly to the end user. And then you have the retailer licenses. That's the dispensaries. And then, or I'm sorry, you have distributor that is also distribution in bulk. And then you have the delivery services that are the services from the retailer directly to the end user. And then lastly, we have testing facilities. These are the facilities that are required to test marijuana and hemp, and that's required by the law for any of the producers to go ahead and test their cannabis. And those laws are different in different states. Like Massachusetts has very strict laws that apply to testing, and that's part of why it's been difficult to operate in that state. And some states have a little bit looser laws that apply to that. You're on mute.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Now, is there a cap on any of the types of licenses that will be issued by the state?
Yeah, so we only know the cap that's going to apply to the cultivation licenses, but that's 37 licenses within the first 24 months. So that is going to be really difficult to be successful in getting a license there. In addition, the existing ATCs, that's the medical treatment centers, they have the ability to convert to recreational, and the regulations actually state that any of those licenses that convert are going to eat up against the 37 licenses that are available. So that number is going to go down.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. We also, the way that the CRC is saying that they're going to accept the applications is on a rolling basis. So there's still a lot up in the air as far as how exactly this process is going to go. But it's probably going to be an application window opens, and then they're going to just continue to keep the application window open and then do it in tiers. Like, okay, if you're submitted by this date, then you're in this pool. If you're submitted by this date, you're in this pool. And then there's also, they have the ability to go through a lottery system if they want to. They don't have to. And they have a requirement to close the application window 90 days before a lottery system. So we're going to see a lot of this unravel as we go through it. Unfortunately, we just don't know, which is kind of normal for, I know all you guys know, it's kind of normal for application processes to just kind of be a little bit working through it as you go and just finding out more information as you go. And then on the manufacturing and retail licenses, they most likely are going to have a cap on the number of licenses, but we don't know what that's going to look like yet.
Gotcha. Now, can you hold, we get, people who are interested in getting all of the licenses. They want to do it all. Is there any restrictions? Can you hold multiple classes of licenses?
Yeah. So as you said, like in Florida, we have vertical integration, right? So that's why everyone wants to be in Florida, because you are actually able and required to cultivate, manufacture, and sell. But in New Jersey, it's a different story. So there are restrictions as far as what kind of licenses the same ownership structure can hold. And that includes the same ownership structure can hold one cultivation and one manufacturing, or one wholesaler, or one retailer. After 24 months, I believe that anyone that has a cultivation manufacturing can also hold a retail, but that's not the case right now. So for groups that are wanting to go after additional licenses to become vertically integrated, they're either going to have to do some creative business structuring as far as the ownership structure, or wait the time until the CRC opens this up for additional licenses to be able to be held.
And do you know the reason why, New Jersey has chosen to restrict this? Like in Florida, I know with the vertical integration, the intent was because we're a medical state, they're worried about the safety of the product and making sure that the one person or one company oversees everything from start to finish. But inherently that has arrived at a lot of people being excluded from being able to get a license, right? Just because of the nature of how big the operation needs to be. So smaller entrepreneurs can't necessarily get involved. Do you have any understanding of why New Jersey decided to structure it this way?
Yeah, I think there's a couple reasons. I think the biggest reason is that they don't want to see the market be monopolized, kind of like what you were saying. And in the past, in New Jersey, it's been a lot of the bigger operators that have came in and taken over. And now this round of applications, I think the focus has really been on creating a framework where locals and social equity individuals can actually have a chance to get involved. So I think that that's the main reason that they're making that a requirement here. And it's pretty ingrained throughout throughout the act and the regulations. The CRCs or the states want to make that happen, even down to the bonus points that are being given out here. Like if you're in an impact zone, if you have social equity, diversity on your team, minority on your team, all of that is going to get you bonus points, and it's important to incorporate that and into your application. And also another thing that the state has done that's different from other application processes here is they've created a conditional application process that is to be able to apply as a conditional for a conditional license, you have to have your owners or people in control only make make less than 200,000 the prior year. And then you also have to have someone holding a threshold of, I think, someone that has been a resident of New Jersey for the past 5 years, holding a certain equity as well. And that is a conditional license that you can eventually convert to an annual license. So I guess my point is, if you look at everything that they're doing, the main goal here is to be able to get locals involved. And there's like mixed reviews as far as, is that a good plan? Is that a bad plan? Right? Because it's a good plan because you want to give back to your state, you want to give back to your community, right? But at the same time, it's a bad plan because in one way you're just creating a structure where people are kind of just trying to get people on board to get the points that they need. And is it really in effect helping the locals? That's one side of it. And these operators are finding ways to get around it. The other side is, do you want people that don't have very strong expertise in cultivating or manufacturing cannabis to be the ones that are running these operations? Because we know, just from like Illinois converting to rec, there is not enough supply, right? So it's important to have operators that are able to provide that supply to the customers. So that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're good thoughts and on both sides, of course. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. Another question that we get a lot is, will New Jersey allow social consumption lounges? Sean, do you know if social consumption lounges are going to be permitted in New Jersey?
Yeah, so consumption is one of the more exciting things in New Jersey. So we saw in the bill earlier this year that the governor signed that there will be social consumption in New Jersey. In these initial rules, there weren't any regulations adopted specifically for consumption areas. So we don't know too much about them. But what we do know from the initial regulations is that you need to first have a retail license, and then you need to apply to both the state and your local municipality in which you're operating in to receive a consumption, cannabis consumption endorsement, which will be attached to your license. And then if you meet the criteria by the state and the local government, you'll be awarded that endorsement, and you'll be allowed to have either an indoor or an outdoor consumption area at the dispensary. But the important thing is that these consumption areas will only be at dispensaries.
Gotcha. So you have to have that retail license if you are interested in doing the consumption,
yeah,
the cannabis
absolutely.
consumption area. Great. Well, thank you for that. I kind of want to move into, because Paula touched on this, and I think it's a very, very important component of both the act and the regulations that were put forward. As Paula mentioned, New Jersey really is trying to set this up to give back to the community, to diversity-owned businesses, and impact areas that were disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. So the statute and the regulations kind of have three different buckets, right? You can have a diversity-owned business, a business that's located in an impact zone, or a social equity applicant. So let's kind of run through those kind of quickly and kind of explain the differences, because there are some nuances that I don't think people are aware of. So Andy, just to kick it off, can you kind of give an explanation of who would qualify as a diversity-owned business?
Happy to. And before I go into that, I think it's also important to note that if you're in one of these categories of diversity-owned business or impact zone or one of the others, you actually it looks like you get to go to the front of the line in the application process. So if you can, so that's always helpful to kind of keep that in mind when you're forming your team or something along those lines. So to answer your question, Amanda, diversity-owned business is a business owned by minorities, women, or disabled veterans. So you have to be in one of those three categories. And to qualify as one of these businesses, there are two primary requirements. One, at least 51% of the ownership interests in the business must be held by people that are minorities, women, or veterans, or disabled veterans. I think that's important to highlight. And two, management and daily operations must be controlled by one or more of the minorities, women, or disabled veterans who own it. So you have to be actively involved. You have to be have a large ownership share and control over the company. And then it's important to note that that in the initial phases of this rollout, to qualify as a diversity-owned business, the applicant must be certified by the Division of Revenue and Enterprise Services within the New Jersey Department of the Treasury. So that's not incredibly complicated to do, but it does take some filing and things along those lines. So
it takes some time. So you need to be on it ahead of time and get ahead of that. You can't just, as part of the application, you can't just prove that you're a women-owned business or a disabled veteran-owned business. You actually need to have this certification from the state, at least in the beginning. Now, later down the line, they might come out with other regulations that there's other, they might not require this in the future, but I think I agree with you, and very important to note that you need to be on top of this if you do plan to apply in the first phase.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And I do agree, it's very important. And this is why we're getting into these definitions. As we'll discuss in a second, priority is given to those applicants that do fall into one of these criteria. So if you are able to meet the requirements of these whether it's diversity owned, being located in an impact zone, or a social equity applicant, you do want to try to do that because it does give you priority over other applicants. Jumping into, could you briefly describe, Sean, like what is an impact zone and how you qualify, as an applicant in an impact zone?
Yeah, so as Paula was talking about before, being located inside of an impact zone is very important because, one of the intent of New Jersey is to give back to the community. So an impact zone, New Jersey gave a very specific sort of definition as to what area qualifies as an impact zone, which they define as an area of having a population of more than 120,000, or ranks in the top 40% of municipalities in the state for minor marijuana possession arrests, has a crime index rate of above 825, or has an annual average unemployment, which is in the top 15% of cities in the state. And so the CRC said that it will publish a full list of these impact zones at some point on its website. It hasn't done so yet, but some of the cities that we're seeing that meet this criteria and that we keep seeing, listed as impact zones are Atlantic City, Camden, Jersey City, Newark, New Brunswick, and Trenton. So those would all qualify as impact zones.
Yeah, and I've even seen much longer lists, but again,
Yeah.
It's just something to check back with. We are seeing those over and over again. Hopefully they do come out, the CRC does come out with the actual list of eligible impact zones, because that definition kind of is hard to figure out for the average Joe. But thank you very much. Now, in order for a business to qualify as an impact zone business, do they have to be located there, or is there another way that they can kind of get this qualification?
Yeah, so being actually physically located in the impact zone is one of the requirements to qualify. Again, that was an extensive list of the impact zones, but that was just a little taste. Some other requirements is that 50% or more of the business owners have to be a current resident of the impact zone and have lived there for 3 consecutive years prior to the application process, or at least 25% of the employees live in the impact zone nearest to the location of the business.
So the business itself, because I read it as an or, right? So the business doesn't have to be physically located in an impact zone if it meets one of the other requirements that it, like you mentioned, that one of the owner's current residents is a resident of an impact zone, or if the employees are majority from an impact zone. But yeah, I think that is an important distinction to make. Wonderful. Now, Paula, could you kind of go over what are the requirements to be qualified as a social equity business?
Sorry, I think I'm muted. More than 50% of the owners either have lived in an economically disadvantaged area for 5 of the 10 last years and has a household income that is 80% or less than the average household income in the state, or are eligible to be pronounced as rehabilitated as defined by the law from at least 2 marijuana or hashish related disorderly persons offenses or 1 indictable offense.
Great. So this kind of goes back to giving back to people who might have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. Now, another type of applicant, like you mentioned before, and we'll discuss in more detail, is the conditional licenses. There's also a way to apply as a micro business. Could you kind of give a description of like what a micro business is under these rules?
Sure. So all of the owners must be New Jersey residents who have resided in the state the last 2 consecutive years, and more than 51% of the owners, officers, directors, or employees live in the municipality that the micro business is located in. And lastly, there can only be 10 employees at the micro business facility. So you are significantly limited as far as what you can do. However, this is a good option for locals that would like to get their foot in the door, but and don't necessarily have the capital to build out a full grow or full manufacturing, but want to get involved.
Right. And now, is the application for a micro business as extensive as it would be for a regular applicant? Is it, do they make it easier on the micro businesses?
Yeah, so the micro business, first of all, the way that the regulations are written right now, it looks like the caps are not going to apply to micro businesses. So I don't think it's going to be a competitive license process. And so and the requirements for it are significantly less strict and in depth. So that's good for the locals that want to get involved.
Now, besides just, the restrictions you just mentioned about having to be all New York residents and being no more than 10 employees, are there restrictions on the specific license types for micro businesses?
Yes. So other than only being able to have 10 employees, there are restrictions on canopy space. There's also restrictions on how much you can produce. So for a cultivation micro business, you can have no more than 2,500 square feet of canopy space and not possess more than 1,000 plants each month. And when they're count for both micro and annual business licenses, when they're counting the canopy space, they're counting that not just the ground floor, but including if you're growing vertical. So that would truly be just 2,500 square feet. And then if you're doing manufacturing, you can also only have 1,000 pounds of cannabis per month. And then for retailer, same requirement, no more than 1,000 pounds of cannabis per month to sell.
Gotcha. Yeah, I also saw, which I thought was interesting, that the micro business holding an annual license couldn't transfer or sell its license. So that's another, if you think you're just going to get a micro business license and flip it real quick and try to make some money, I saw that, you can't do that. Don't do that. Yeah. They won't approve that transfer.
So that's the same thing for, it's a little bit more strict for the micro business, just because you always have to keep the requirements of the ownership structure like in place that are required for the micro business. But even for the annual licenses, you can't significantly change ownership for 2 years after you're operational. So that actually is probably going to be like about 4 years, because it's going to take about 2 years to get fully operational, and then 2 years from that point. So that's something else to be aware of, that you're really going to have a hard time flipping the annual licenses as well, unless that's something that you kind of already have set up on the front end in the application, and you have those people involved already. I mean, there's ways you can get around it most likely, but it's going to be really difficult.
Right, because you always have to go through the state to get approved for any transfer. It's not like you can just do it willy-nilly. You actually have to get approved for it.
Right. And
I
one
think
other
that's
point to that is the people that are going to be scoring and looking into the ownership structure and the management services agreements and approving them are the same people that review them for the gaming industry. And the gaming industry is very similar and highly regulated to cannabis. And there's been a lot of, I guess people find loopholes to try to get around things there. So that agency is like very well versed in all of this type of ownership structure, gamesmanship. So you have to be really careful and make sure that you're structuring it properly.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. We, hear people say, "Oh, we can find a creative way around it," but I think that's a very good point. That this agency that is keeping an eye on it is well versed in people trying to play games. So yeah, it's a good thing to be aware of for sure. Now, Andy, could you tell us a little bit about conditional license? We heard about the micro business, so no cap. It's great for entrepreneurs, locals in New Jersey. Might be a way, as Paula mentioned, it's not as a competitive process, just because there is no cap on these licenses. Talk to us a little bit more about conditional licenses, like Paula mentioned earlier. What are the can you explain what a conditional license is?
Yeah, sure thing. So it's similar to a micro business license in that the conditional license is a way for entrepreneurs to get into this industry. And a conditional applicant can apply for a license without first having an appropriate location secured. So they don't have the real estate, they haven't signed a lease, they don't have title to the land yet or anything like that. So the conditional applicant would need to submit. So basically what they do is you can apply, and if you're awarded the conditional license, then you have 120 days to find an appropriate location that is able to hold one of these operations and secure. Then you also have to get secure municipal approval, and then apply. Then you can apply for a conversion to an annual license if you get all those things and they're in place. And then you can move forward. You can also get extensions in there. So it gives you time to, if you don't have the stuff, don't have the real estate, it gives you time to, in the space to just see if you can get an application, see if you can get approved for an application. And if you do, then you can move forward and get all the pieces in order.
Yeah, one of the questions we just got from the audience is, for conditional licenses, how does the location part work? Now, we're going to discuss the municipal approval because that's important for all license types here in a few minutes. But specifically, 120 days isn't actually as long as it sounds, right? It's like 4 months to do a lot of things. And as we know, with working with local and county city governments, things don't move quickly. So, do you see that timing being an issue, or do you have any recommendations? And this question could be for anybody, as far as, how that piece, the municipal piece works with the conditional applications.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's going to be super fast. So I don't know. I don't even know how that's going to get done in that amount of time for a lot of people. So I imagine, they'll just have to, you'll just have to put it through and have all your pieces in order, get everything done. So, it's only a matter of doing those last couple things once you get approved. So, it's about getting every other aspect of your application done so you can focus on those, securing the location and getting that final approval. But in addition to that, it's, and I know you mentioned we're going to talk about the municipal aspect later, but the relationship that you develop with the municipalities is going to be super, super important. They have a lot of power here, and they get to make recommendations to the CRC and about which places get licenses, and they also can regulate like the amount of people that have licenses in their town, the hours that they operate, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really important to be working with start making connections with the municipality or working with an attorney that can start helping you do that.
Absolutely. And actually, I mean, I don't want to cut and jump ahead, but I found it interesting that in the rules that just came out, they actually say that a municipality can like write a letter to the commission and actually like say who's their favorite, like we actually support one over the other. So it is really, really important. And not that the CRC will 100% listen to their guidance, but the municipalities do hold a lot of power here. So I agree, it's incredibly important to have a good relationship with the municipality. Another question we had that came through the chat was, can you get a conditional license for a micro business license?
Yes, you can. Absolutely.
Cool. And what are the qualifications? Paula did mention the threshold that, you can't make the owners of a conditional license applicant. She did already mention, they can't have more than a gross income for the previous year of 200,000. Is there any like residency requirement for the conditional licenses?
Yeah, there are. It's a little bit different than the extent of time that Paula was mentioning. So for this, for the conditional license, at least one owner of the business must have resided in the state for the last 2 years, as opposed to 5, prior to the date of the application. So there definitely is a residency requirement. And then each owner who has decision-making authority in the business must have, same thing as you were saying with Paula, must have an adjusted gross income of $200,000 or less, and in the immediately preceding tax year, or make no more than $400,000 if you're jointly filing with a spouse. So there are these similar qualifications and restrictions for conditional applicants.
We are having a question come through the chat, and I'll just throw this out there to everybody. So they ask, why do minority and women-owned businesses not have a residency requirement, but disabled veterans are held to a higher standard and have an actual residency requirement for the primary owner? I'm not familiar, honestly, with for all applicants. At least one owner actually must reside in New Jersey. So there's a residency requirement for everybody, is what I read in the rules. But do any of you know if there's specifically a higher residency requirement required of disabled veterans versus women and minority-owned businesses? I was not aware of that, but are you guys aware?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm looking at and I'm like just glancing at the rules right now and like trying to see if that's there, and I'm not seeing any, again, it's just a cursory thing, but I'm not seeing any heightened restrictions, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, Andy, I agree with you. I just pulled up the rules as well, and let's see, under section 1730-6.4, it's on page 34. If you guys are looking at the regulations, it talks about disabled veterans business or disabled veteran owned business. It's a business that meets the requirements under the act. So maybe we need to go look at the act requirement for that. And then the requirements are at least 51% of the ownership interest and control is held by persons who are disabled veterans. And then here's what I thought was like a higher standard, is that the business has been officially verified by the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs as a service disabled veteran-owned small business. So that does seem like another qualifier that you'll have to go through for that. But I'm also not aware that the disabled vet has to be a resident. Where, if you can respond maybe in the chat, where did you see that there was a requirement that they have to be a resident?
Yeah, and we can, even if we're not able to answer this online, drop your contact information, and maybe we can reach out to you afterwards and look into this a little further, because that is something that I have not heard either. Now, we do have a question about minority, about if there's multiple groups applying with diversity candidates or social equity or impact zones, do all get moved to the front of the line? Is everybody granted priority if they fall into one of the 3 categories? And from my understanding is yes. If you, if you qualify as diversity owned, social equity or in an impact zone, all applicants are given priority. Now, again, like Paula said, there is a cap on the licenses for cultivation at 37. So and it is done on a rolling basis. So if let's say everybody, even though you do get the priority, and let's say all of them score perfect scores, you still could be subject to a lottery as well. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. Everybody that does qualify is given priority, but again, there are possible limitations, especially on cultivation and maybe, as we will see in the future, on other license types as well. So something to keep in mind. Now, kind of jumping into the application process itself. Sean, once applications are allowed to be submitted, we kind of just touched on this. What exactly are the priorities that will be given? Can you kind of run through? We've seen in the rules several different types of priorities that will be given. Can you just clarify?
Yeah, obviously, like we just said, probably the biggest one is that any sort of diversity or minority-owned business is going to have, priority over all other licenses. And then beyond that, conditional licenses have priority over annual licenses. So again, prioritizing sort of those smaller businesses, and then micro businesses have licenses over standard businesses. So again, we're seeing this repetition of New Jersey sort of prioritizing these smaller businesses and getting those applications sort of approved quicker. And then applicants who are awarded bonus points for being residents of New Jersey have priority over applicants who didn't receive any bonus points for their lack of residency.
Yeah. And there's a few ways you can get bonus points. There's a mention of certain things in the rules, but we are waiting on more regulations to come out as far as how the applicants, the scoring rubric. So we are waiting on more formalized rules about the application process itself and the scoring process. So yeah, I mean, we anticipate these rules will, these guidelines will be issued shortly, but we have not seen them. They were not part of this recent rules that just came out. And this is kind of a question for everybody. Although the CRC has not issued any information about specifically when they're going to be accepting applications, do you all have any predictions on when we might see the application process open up? We get this question every day. So do you guys have any insight of when we might see the applications open?
Go ahead, Paula.
Okay. So there was a lot of panic after the initial regulations came out, because there is a requirement in the law that says that at 30 days after regulations come out, the CRC then has to issue an application process. And from my understanding and conversations, that's actually, the 30 days isn't triggered yet. The 30 days will be triggered once the CRC comes out with rules that are applicable significantly to the application process. And that just hasn't happened yet. As far as the timeline for when that's going to happen, most likely sometime between, what I'm hearing is most likely sometime between September 20th and 30th, they're going to issue a notice of RFA. And then from there, start working on the rules and regulations that apply to that specifically. And then I think we're going to see the application window actually open in about 2 months. And then once it opens, it's going to stay open for 30 days. Lately, a lot of agencies have been extending due to COVID. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. So a lot of these application windows open for 30 days get extended for 45 to 60 days. So, but I would just be ready. I would if I were applying for a license, I would try to at least have something together to work off of by the end of this month. And then once they issue the actual application, then you can just tailor it to that.
Smart. I mean, because again, you have a very short window sometimes to get the application in. And as we will kind of run through quickly in a minute, some of the annual license application requirements, I mean, there's a lot of information that you're required to submit. So it is very important to kind of don't wait until the application process opens to start this. You really need to start putting your material together now if you really want to be one of the first applicants. But Sean, what are some of the requirements for the annual cannabis license application? What will these companies, if they want the annual license, have to submit as part of their application?
Yeah, so the annual license is a lot more comprehensive than the conditional license. So there's a lot more information that you need to submit. So that will be the list of all persons, such as your owners, your investors, your managers, and how much ownership percentage each of those people have. You have to submit a description of your proposed land, and document evidence that you have legal access to the land, whether you through a deed or through a lease. You have to show evidence of complying with all local ordinances and regulations. There needs to be zoning approval. There needs to be local support. Operators need to obtain liability insurance. They need to submit operating plans, a business and financial plan, safety and security plan, community impact, social responsibility and research statement, and a workforce development and creation plan, standard operating procedures, and an agreement with a labor organization that the business is entering into a labor peace agreement, with that organization. So there's a long list of documents that need to be submitted to the state. So that's why it's definitely important getting started now, working to get these documents going.
Yeah, and as far as the signed agreement with a bona fide labor organization, I mean, that might take some time to negotiate and get that executed. So, I mean, that's an important thing to kind of almost get started on now.
Yeah, what I forgot to mention about that is that's not a requirement for micro licenses. So for the smaller businesses, that's not a requirement. So yes, it's going to be very, labor extensive for the full licenses, as we're calling it, but for the micro licenses, you don't. That's sort of the one requirement that they don't have to meet is that labor organization.
Yeah, and is there a residency requirement for the annual leaseholder? I kind of mentioned this before, but are there residency requirements for the full license?
Yeah, so one of the owners has to have resided in New Jersey for at least 2 years.
And Andy, now, as part of, Sean mentioned, you have to fully disclose all your owners, operators, management people. They require a lot of personal information about all those people. You have to disclose if you were in bankruptcy before, where you live. They require a lot of background information about the owners. Are there any rules that require any type of criminal history background check for applicants?
Yes, there definitely are. There's background checks required for just about everyone involved, from the owners to principals to employees and volunteers of the businesses. And so they have to submit fingerprints and criminal history and submit for a criminal history background check. Now,
it's not like what counts as a disqualifying conviction. Like, is it simply like a DUI or, something in your past when you were a kid? Is there any parameters or time window that they're looking at for these disqualifying convictions?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's definitely parameters. Not everything disqualifies you for sure. And they're just kind of targeting it in certain areas. So some things that would disqualify you, or the areas that would disqualify you, are if you were convicted of employing a juvenile in a drug distribution scheme, distributing drugs or drug paraphernalia to a minor, selling counterfeit drugs or medical devices, booby traps in a manufacturing or distribution facility, which it's a strange one to me, and crimes involving fraud, deceit, or embezzlement. And then it's important to note, though, that these restrictions only apply to convictions that occurred less than 5 years since the date of conviction, or satisfactory completion of probation or parole, or release from incarceration, whichever is later. So 5 years, you got a 5-year kind of going back.
Yeah, a 5-year look back, it looks like. So if something happened 20 years ago, they're not really that interested in it. Now, a very important topic to kind of get into is the municipal authority and what the local counties and cities are able to do, and how that goes hand in hand with kind of where you're looking to operate and locate your business. So Paula, are there what kind of power do the counties and municipalities have to either prohibit or regulate within their jurisdiction? You're on mute.
Sorry, guys. So they can opt out by passing an ordinance banning all types of cannabis. If they haven't taken any action, I believe it was as of August 21st, then they were automatically opted in. If they do opt out and they decide to opt in, they can opt in at any point. However, once they opt in, they're required to stay opted in for 5 years. So
go ahead.
What a lot of municipalities are doing right now, because they don't know what the final framework is going to look like, and they didn't get even these emergency regulations until that deadline was already like literally, I think it was just a couple of days before that deadline was up. So they didn't have enough time to digest it. A lot of them have opted out and decided that they're going to opt in if they're okay with the regulations. If you read the city council meeting minutes, like pretty much, I mean, I would say like 50% of the ones that have opted out are there. Another thing is, a lot of the ones that have opted out really just are opting out because no one has approached them and had a conversation with them about, hey, let me educate you. I want to locate here. Here's why it's safe. Here's why it's going to make you money, and kind of go that route. And what I've seen is a lot of municipalities, if you approach them the right way, then they're actually open to opening it up for you.
Yeah, I believe you're absolutely correct. We saw these initial rules, which aren't even complete, right? They don't even address everything, like the application process, like you mentioned. I mean, they're just not complete. Those came out on August 19th, and the deadline for the municipalities to opt out under the original act was August 21st, which is just a few days before. So it gave them no time, like you said, to digest. So do you know roughly how many municipalities have opted out thus far? I mean, I think it's important to note, like you mentioned, we anticipate a lot will opt back in, hopefully. But how many, what are we looking at right now?
Yeah, around 70% of municipalities have opted out in one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. But I mean, it is important for you guys to realize that, you need to look into that when you're deciding on where to locate your business. I mean, hopefully they'll opt back in. But as far as like applying, if your county has not opted back in prior to your application, I mean, part of the application process is getting municipal approval. So if your county has opted out, it's an important thing to take a look at prior to applying. You need to pay close attention to those counties that have opted out, which is a good majority, 70%.
And that's a big deal, Amanda. That's not as big of a deal for the conditional and annual license applicants, right? Because they can locate anywhere. But for the micro business license applicants, it's a big deal because there's a requirement in there that you have to reside in that municipality. So it's pretty much like disadvantaging them more than anyone else.
Very true. And hopefully the regulators and CRC kind of sees that. I agree. That's a huge problem. Now, are there, besides just completely opting out, are there other ways that the municipality can like restrict how the cannabis operations go down in their jurisdiction?
Yeah, so as Andy and you were talking about earlier, the municipalities have a lot of control here. This is like, I mean, I guess up until California, this is like the most control I've seen given to municipalities. So I guess in a state-run process, this is the most control that I've seen, right? So they can do pretty much anything they want. They are able to establish a limit on the number of licenses. They can limit where the locations can be, so in specifically zoned areas, even describing it down to the specific development area. They can, so the state in prior application rounds required on the state level that the facilities have to be a certain amount of feet away from churches, schools, parks, all of that. And now that's all on the local level. So pretty standard on the local level we're seeing is anywhere from 500 to 1,000 square feet requirement away from schools, churches, and then a couple other things. But that's another thing that you need to keep in mind, that you have to look at the ordinance and make sure that you are in compliance with that. And then they also are able to, what I've been seeing is that some of the city councils are actually creating their own like mini commission, like mini board to review applications on the local level, and then they're gonna decide who they're willing to write a letter for or not at that point. Some localities, some mayors will write a letter of recommendation for anyone that wants to be there as long as they're in the right zoned area. Some have decided that they're only going to write letters for as many as they have licenses available for. So let's say they only have 2 cultivation licenses. You better make sure that you're jumping on that, because otherwise you may be too late to the game.
Gotcha. Very good advice.
That's also something you have to figure out, you know, in your strategy. Is it better for you to do that and go into an area where it's more limited, or is it better for you to go into another area? And also because we just don't know so much about how the state side is going to go, it's like really hard to make a decision.
Yeah, all the reason to get professionals involved in helping you make some of these decisions. We are running tight on time, so we will run a little bit over. Panelists, if you need to jump because you have other obligations, please feel free. But we'll run a little bit over here. We do have a poll question that Sean is going to kind of put up on the screen. We're interested in where our attendees are located, and we were interested in seeing what you're interested in. So if you could answer the poll questions that just popped up on your screen, we'd really appreciate it. I kind of, just to let you know, they did in the rules, we won't go over this in detail, the fees and taxes were kind of set out in these regulations. So, you know, the application fees range anywhere from $100 to $1,600, and the annual renewal fees that you can expect to pay for the micro businesses, it's $1,000, and standard applicants annual licenses are anywhere between $5,000 to $50,000 based on the tiers that kind of Paula was mentioning, based on your canopy space and stuff for cultivators. So if you want to know exactly where you fall, you know, feel free to please, you know, check out the rules or reach out to us after. I would love to answer some questions, and let's see if any of you have any questions. Please drop them in the Q&A or the chat. I think we've been trying to answer them as we go along, so there shouldn't be too many, but if you do have questions you haven't asked, now's your time. Please drop them in. So one question from Brian was, can I apply to only sell to medical patients? Sean, do you want to kind of answer that? I mean, what we're talking about here is adult use. So this doesn't require, as long as you're 21 and over, you're not required to have a medical license. Now, they do have a medical scheme that Paula was talking about, the ACTs. Can you still apply for an ACT license? Do you know?
As far as I don't know for certain, but as far as I know, I believe you still can apply for a medical license.
Now, from what I understand, I believe it's more of a vertically integrated system. You know, do you guys know in New Jersey what the medical scheme is? Because it's kind of different. You either have the medical side or the reg side, or the adult use side.
Yeah, I know medical isn't vertically, because I applied in the medical round of applications and we did just a processing. So I know it's not vertical, but But yeah, but to Amanda's point, it is, obviously we are talking about adult use instead of medical, but I do think the medical applications are also on an ongoing basis. So I still think you can apply. I just don't know how many they are accepting at this point.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
According to Raymond, the applications have closed.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, again, I haven't even tried since that application process. So.
Yeah, I wasn't ready for that question. We're really,
into
these. We're really into the adult use right now, just because that's where all the interest is. But thank you, Raymond, for pitching in there and answering that question. Do we have any? I'm looking. We already answered, it looks like, most of these. Do we have any other questions from the audience before we kind of close here? I think I'm just going through and making sure we answered all of these. Looks like we have. I guess I'll just end it with kind of a conclusion, just a concluding question to both of you. Kind of what advice would you give our attendees here if you're an operator looking to kind of gain an advantage in this round of applications? Do you guys have any closing thoughts on ways to be competitive here?
Sure. There's a few things you should do. I mean, first thing first is to start your application process. Start getting all this stuff in order before the applications are being able to be submitted. And so you want to do a lot there. You want to start working with your municipality, like we mentioned before. You want to, if possible, you want to start gaining these little additional points that are available throughout the application process. So, partnering up with a New Jersey resident, partnering up with a social equity applicant, partnering, or if you want to go another way, doing a micro business, and things along those lines that will give you a bit of a leg up or reduce that barrier to entry and get you to the front of the application process. So it's things like that, and you just need to kind of be prepared and get ready to go.
Agreed. Yeah, that's good advice. Sean, any final thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. In addition to making sure that you develop the right team, as I mentioned, for the annual license, there's a whole long laundry list of documents that need to be submitted to the state, especially the operating procedures and your business plans and stuff like that, which are going to be extensive in and of themselves. So I think getting started on preparing as many of those documents now as you can, I think will put you in the best position for when applications open up in November or December, sometime later this year. You'll be good and ready and prepared to submit it versus having to scramble at the very end in a very competitive marketplace.
Yes, very good advice. I mean, something unfortunately, we weren't able to get to is kind of the security requirements of some of these businesses. I mean, you have to have video cameras at ingress and egress. You have to have cameras inside and outside. There are a lot of requirements. You have to have, the state will mandate a tracking system for products. You're going to have to implement that specific chosen program into your operations. So there's a lot of details that you need to start looking into and thinking about now, because sure, you can hire a lawyer and we're happy to help you. But at the end of the day, you have to be involved. We can't just draft your application for you. You have to be highly involved, because what we write on the paper is how you're going to operate your business. So we can make it sound great, but you have to give us the info on how you're going to operate your business. So these are all things you need to start thinking about now. Don't wait till the last minute. And both of our groups, both Canacor Group as well as our law firm, are taking on limited representation. So, you want to go ahead and partner up with a professional now, because we are not taking unlimited applicants. We are being, careful not to overextend ourselves and taking on limited applicants to assist. So, I just want to thank you, gentlemen, for your time. I think this was a great event, and I really appreciate everyone who participated and attended today. If you do have any questions, I did drop our firm's contact information in the chat. Feel free to reach out after this. We'd be happy to talk to you further about the application process in New Jersey. And pay attention, we will be having more webinars in the future as more rules come out. So stay tuned, and we look forward to talking with you all again. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Take care.